Now, it's very possible if you're watching this, you already really enjoy this series. But if you are kind of just curious and want to know more or always thought this wasn't for you, maybe listen in because I 100% had written this off for so long and didn't really have any intention to read it. And the Magician's Trilogy I ended up loving, and so we're going to talk a bit more about why. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video we're going to be talking about the Magician's Trilogy by Grossman, and right now I only still have the first book, but as of filming this I literally just ordered the box set of the hardcovers. I found a good price online, and as I really need to have the whole series and the hardcovers because I love the first book, and while the first book may be my favorite out of them, partially just because it was such a surprise that I loved it, I really enjoyed this trilogy, and it is not at all what I expected or what I think the idea in my head of what it was, or what I've heard other people think it was too. So this is going to be part like series review, part like why you should read or shouldn't. I'm not laying it out completely like one of those, but it's going to be a little bit of mix of both, and we'll see how I title it because I don't know yet. But let's talk about this series. So I mentioned in my review of the first book, The Magicians is often like marketed, at least by the people. I hear people say like, "Oh, it's Harry Potter for adults," or it's this kind of thing. It's the idea that it's just adult magic school instead of what it actually is. Because I think that is not a good way to sell this. Because if you go in and expect that, if you're expecting this to just be like, a Harry Potter style academia type setting, or even like a dark academia setting, that's really not what this is. And I think that's partially, for me at least, that was the big reason why I never seemed interested. I heard that Harry Potter for adults, immediately that made me just not really want to read this. And instead, this is really just a both kind of sarcastic riposte to a lot of the kind of tropes and fantastical ideas, especially in stuff you read when you're younger, and also just kind of an exploration of fantasy, what it means to people that, growing up, becoming an adult, and dealing with the darker realities of life and the everything that goes along with it. And so we're doing so many different things here. And while, especially in the first book, there's a lot more of the kind of the sarcastic kind of approach to it, you can just tell, especially when reading the series in its entirety, that Lev Grossman is a big fan of fantasy and thinks fantasy is important. And I think for people who, especially if you like a lot of the modern fantasy kind of stylings, where it's a little bit more analytical and a little bit less of the simplistic kind of stuff that you might have gotten in yesteryear, this is something that you definitely, I think, should check out because it is really, really good. This is too. I know I've seen some people. This is I think a little bit more like on the literary fantasy side, I would say. And I've seen people that try to say like, oh, this is a book that like thinks it's better than other fantasy. Maybe there are some people out there that are like the kind of the snobs that are like, oh, I can read this because it's not fantasy. Like, this is straight up fantasy. This is 100% fantasy. It is a little bit more literary in the writing style and with the fact that it's centering around different themes, but I would argue that plenty of other things that are popular in the fantasy books that are looked at straight up fantasy are also a little bit closer to the literary side. So there's definitely plenty of that. So I don't think there's a huge divide as much as there used to be anyway. But this does feel like it's a little bit more on that side, but the fantasy elements are absolutely there. And again, I can't read this as anything but somebody who cares enough about fantasy to be able to write this type of story and explore this. So let's talk a little bit more about what we're following here. And specifically, I'll give kind of a synopsis of the first book a little bit because I don't want to spoil anything with it. But this is following it in the first book specifically, Quentin Coldwater, who is a gifted kid, extremely smart, and he's getting ready to go to a college interview, and something happens, and he ends up instead being invited to take an entrance exam for Break Bills, the magic university, so to speak, in the U.S., and that's kind of the impetus of what kicks it off. And really, the first book, the way I would sell it, is it's exploring that idea of, the kid, the person, who never got that magic school letter, like always like really just wanted the fantasy to be real, wanted to go through the portal and open up a closet and go into another world, or get that letter to go to the magic school, or all those things that kind of like that the childhood dreams that you have about fantasy, and it never happens, and and that can affect you as a person. But then Quentin, when he's already kind of older and still never quite let go of that, and it's informed a lot of who he is, he now is actually kind of getting to go there. He's getting that. He's like, magic is real, but it's not what he expected, and it's exploring a lot of the ideas that it doesn't necessarily help. If you're a depressed asshole and have a lot of issues, suddenly finding out that you can do magic is not, in fact, going to help that. And in fact, it's kind of talks about how there are a lot of people with some of that kind of the mindset in the similar ways who end up being able to use magic. And so that's kind of where we start and what we're exploring. So the thing I will mention here, and something that a lot of people very reasonably struggle with, is Quentin is not a likable character, and in fact most of the characters are not. I saw a review on Goodreads that was for the second book, and it was a negative review, but I thought it was hilarious and accurate, even though I like it anyway. But it was something to the effect of a sarcastic asshole and like another super obnoxious person written by an asshole, and just like that kind of like thing. And I don't know, if you look at the review, you'll probably find it for book 2. I thought it was hilarious. I'm like, you're not wrong. The characters are not likable. They are in a lot of ways they're extremely flawed, and they're not very likable, and it can be kind of hard to sympathize with. I think the thing that I latched onto is just being able to kind of relate in some ways to the main character with sort of the trope or the archetype of the former gifted kid kind of thing. I could get a little bit, as well as just that idea of the kid, a little bit bitter that you had to grow up and the fantasy land never happened. And even when you do, and so I think it's the character's a little bit more relatable than some people probably would want to admit in some ways, I guess. But we do have some other characters later on too, also extremely flawed, also have a lot of problems. But the character study and the way the characters interact around the themes, I think, are still really, really strong. So yeah, you're not going to come in here finding likable characters, and if you really need likable characters, this is probably not going to work for you. But if you can get past that, there is really a lot of good here. Now, I've talked a couple times about theme, and part of the styling of this being a little bit more of the like literary fantasy, when it's wrapped around tightly around themes. And across the trilogy, it is pretty expansive, because I talked about in the first one, it's really kind of exploring childhood and those dreams, and that we revisit that kind of throughout too. And part of the themes it explores is letting go of your childhood. And for Quentin, who finds out some of the things he believed in when he was a kid are actually real, and that makes it even harder to kind of let go of that. But it's still exploring the idea of letting go of your childhood, of living in the world, and not just living in your head, and that kind of thing as well. It also does some really good exploration of things like addiction and substance abuse and things like that as well, both with actual like substance abuses and with corollaries with magic. The second book, not giving any spoilers at all, but we follow a different character, and we see them just trying to learn magic and being really desperate to, and really going through where you could change magic to like heroin and it would work almost exactly the same with the story, and just kind of exploring the ideas of that addiction and how that can interplay with magic as well. And so it's using the setting of both our real world and the magical worlds and the magic that exists to explore these types of themes, as well as some like bigger themes that are a little harder to get into without spoilers, because I don't want to totally give a whole lot away. But it's done really, really well with exploring these things. And it's, again, where the characters are very flawed and they're not the most relatable characters or the most likable characters, but I think you can at least sympathize with them, and they're so realistic is the thing too. I feel like you're reading this, you probably can think of like, yeah, I know somebody that's just like this. Maybe they're not your friend, and maybe there's a good reason for that if they're like one of the characters in the book, but I feel like it's characters that feel incredibly real, and they're very flawed. They're not over the top flawed, but they just they feel so incredibly real, and in turn it makes the things that are happening and the world feel real as well. And this is exploring a lot of different fantasy. And it definitely does. I mean, there are references to like Harry Potter and to Narnia for sure. Part of the setup here is that there's this fictional book series called Fillory, which is sort of Narnia-ish for sure, where somebody goes in through a clock. But it's also like that's just another type of magical thing that's mentioned. So these other ones do exist specifically, and like there are some references to them. And again, while this is in some ways a sarcastic send up of some of those sorts of tropes and ideas, it also, you can just see there's a lot of love and appreciation there beneath the surface too, with having it written, because you're exploring these different things. But it also is just taking it in a different direction. And I'll mention that Adrian Tchaikovsky had a novella in Put Away Childish Things that did a similar thing to what it was exploring. That was exploring the idea of there was this magical world that was real, but not quite what it seemed or what was expected. And we're looking at that a bit here, but expanded way more, because obviously this is a trilogy and that was a novella. But looking at that kind of thing and making you rethink all of these things about like kid stories, like why is it that these kids were, you know, going into these fantasy lands and they're the ones who are supposed to be like saving the day or be heroes, and they're just kids. We're thinking about like in Narnia, where you know, you have the kids go in there and then they grow up and become adults and then have to like come back and be kids again, and how incredibly hard that would be. And then extrapolating some of the ideas, which I'm sure are there too, but just like, you know, why maybe would these kids be so just desperate to go into a fantasy world? And, you know, anybody who had a less than happy childhood can probably relate to some of that thing, you know, wishing you could go into a fantasy world and just escape and never come back. And so it explores just so many of these ideas and themes and does a really great job, and it just is so easy to immerse in, because I think it just felt so incredibly real. And Lev Grossman is a really good author too, and the writing as well. It's very easy to consume. It's well written. It's not like super over the top. I will say book 2 deals a lot with sort of like math and or technology, and did get a little bit tiresome at some points with some of those descriptions, which thankfully was just in one POV. But it despite all of that, and the fact that the characters are all like incredibly intelligent, like genius level, like best of the best type people that we're following for the most part. Those are the people who end up becoming magicians in this world. So you definitely have some of that, but it's not the like, oh, they're smart, they're better than you. It's, yeah, they're really smart, but they also are dumb in some ways, and very human, and very also flawed in a lot of other ways as well. So it's just going on this journey. And this is a very character focused as well as, I feel like, world focused type of story, because so much of this really is exploring the characters, but the magical world of Fillory is itself a character in so many ways. There's lots of different characters and beings and creatures that come there, but just the idea of Fillory and magic as a whole is such an important facet of this story and what's being told here, and it just is all woven in really nicely. And it's just, I found myself again, I'm still kind of shocked. I ended up reading book 2 and 3 back to back, because, wow, nothing like totally just completely ends. Each book has sort of a satisfying end, so to speak, but book 2, the way that one went, I'm just like, yeah, I immediately have to continue. And it's I think especially for the modern fantasy fan who is liking things a little bit more, like, you know, for example, while tonally I think this is entirely different, but Abercrombie, his whole thing was kind of sarcastic take and, like, you know, flipping tropes, that type of thing. This is more of like a biting sarcastic with like a more real / you know, sometimes darker undertones around that, but it's really exploring a lot of these different things, but taking a different approach to it, or trying to dig into why this is the way that it is, and having these real flawed characters be involved in all of it. And so I think there's like really a ton for the modern fantasy reader to check out, as well as, even if you are the person who just loves the classic stuff, and I'm kind of a mix of both, because I do love a lot of the classic fantasy tropes and the classic style stuff where we're using, you know, the Tolkien influence and things like that, and doing a lot of that kind of stuff. It's also just like you can see that Lev Grossman's a big fan of a lot of that stuff too, and obviously fantasy was really important to him as well. And it's just he wouldn't have been able to write this the way that it's written without that. So I think if you have that, and I did make a comment too in my review, like I feel like this does need at least a little bit of that like jaded adult to fully appreciate and connect with. because if you don't have any of that, then you might really struggle to connect with the story and the characters completely. But I feel like many people have at least a little bit of that kind of like the jaded thing with it and with fantasy. And like I said, I not saying that we're all just sitting out here and we're the characters in this book wishing we could go in, but I mean, I feel like if almost anybody watching this suddenly opened up something and saw a portal to a fantasy land, I mean, how many of us are really thinking twice before we jump in? And how many of us would really react that way? But it's just such an interesting exploration of all of those things, while, like I said, exploring other themes like addiction and substance abuse and depression and other mental health things in general. It has a lot of things that just don't turn out the way that you would expect. You might see some things coming, but there are so many things where things go off in odd directions or crazy directions, and you don't fully know what's going to happen. Where at other times there's stuff that's almost choreographed. It's like, well, this is what's supposed to happen in the fantasy story, that type of thing as well. So it's such a great mix of both of those elements, and there are just so many great scenes and powerful moments, and really great character moments as well. And it's just so much to enjoy here, and I really do recommend at least giving this a shot. Like I said, this is the kind of thing I know a lot of people are going to bounce from because the characters are insufferable in a lot of ways. That's one of those things I don't have as much problem with that myself. I've had some other books or series that I really enjoy that have incredibly unlikable characters, so that's never been something that's really bothered me. But it's just, again, if you're a really character-focused reader, you might have to try a little bit harder to connect. But I feel like if you can connect, there's a lot of reward there. If you are somebody who likes more of the literary thing, likes theme, there's a ton of that here too. And if you just want to feel immersed in a fantasy world as well, this is a really immersive experience as well. So I think it has a little bit of something for everyone, and is really, I think, just a must read for so many readers, but especially if you're that just a little bit bitter, just a little bit jaded type of reader that you never got to go to Fantasyland. This is a series that you need to read, and I think that you'll get a lot out of as well. So that's pretty much it. That's all I'm going to talk about here with this series. I do, like I said, I absolutely recommend checking out Magicians by Lev Grossman. This has been one of the most surprising experiences in a long time. It's hard to think of something that was more surprising than how much I enjoyed the series after it's one I pretty much completely written off. So maybe if you check it out, you will be too. And if it's not and you don't end up liking it, I do think that's understandable. Like I said, this is going to be something that won't work for everyone. But if you do check it out, I hope you do enjoy it. If you have already read it, definitely let me know your thoughts in the comments as well. I'd love to hear from you as always. But that's it for this one. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the links in the description as always for the Patreon if you want to support what I do, as well as the Wizard of the Enclave Discord if you want to chat books, whether these books, other books, really anything at all. It's a lot of fun and we'd love to have you. And of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.